Hi everyone. Today my guest is Professor Selin Kesebir. She's an associate professor of organizational behavior in London Business School. Her research focuses on competition, gender inequality, and cultural transmission. She's Turkish as I am, but we'll do our interview in English. Thank you, Professor Kesebir, for being my guest.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
So my first question is, how long have you been in academia since your bachelor's degree?
I've been in the academia since my bachelor's degree, which I got in 2002. So that makes it about 22 years now.
22 years.
Yeah. The first 10 years were in PhD programs or like being a postdoc, but the remaining 14 years almost now has been as a faculty member.
Okay. And before choosing academia, what were the other options that you were considering, and why did you choose academia?
I don't think I really considered any options other than academia, seriously. For me, the question was not whether I go into the academia or not, but which field in academia I would go into. So, in high school, I had this idea of becoming a diplomat for a short time. That's why I majored in international relations. But in a short time, I could see that wouldn't be the right choice for me. And I was always interested in knowledge and ideas, reading, learning. That was always something attractive to me. So I knew I wanted to be an academic. My father is an academic. We have other academics in my family on my father's side in particular, which perhaps also made it a little bit more likely because as you may know, there is research showing that people are more likely to choose their father's or mother's occupations. In some cases, they are maybe like 7 times more likely to choose their parents' occupations. For example, sons of military men are about like 7 times more likely to go into the military. So yeah, I mean, that was probably a factor as well. But one thing that I never ever considered was joining a for-profit organization, like a company. That was something that I never considered, for example. So, and going into the academia, I considered 2 options in terms of the academic field. One was social psychology, which I later chose. The other was sociology of science, history of science, philosophy of science. There were some programs that combined those different disciplines. But I was interested in science in generally. I had read The Cosmos by Carl Sagan. I was reading some popular science books at the time, which were being published in Turkish by the scientific agency in Turkey. So, but in the end, I ended up in psychology.
Okay. And you did your bachelor's in economics and international relations, and then
Yes.
you go on to pursue a master's in cognitive science in the States. And
Yeah.
so, how did that transition happen for you after studying
Yeah.
in another field for 4 years?
It was not too hard, partly because I had already taken some psychology courses when I was in college, partly because it's all social science and it wasn't too strange, the ideas in psychology, the methods, the way of thinking. So when I wanted to pursue a PhD in psychology, when I made that decision, I started reading. I started reading in psychology. I prepared for the GRE in psychology. I started reading textbooks in psychology. So I felt I was quite prepared for the program when I entered the PhD program.
Okay, nice. And you said that there's a family influence on being an academic as well. And I know that
Yeah.
your twin is also a psychology researcher. So is it kind of like an intentional that I don't know? Was it? It's not a coincidence, I guess, that you're both psychologists, or
It's probably not a coincidence. I mean, we are identical twins. We share the same genes. We were raised in the very same environment. We went to the very same schools. So, so we were probably quite likely to end up in the very same profession. She also got a PhD in social psychology. We have written 2 papers together. We have published 2 papers together, and it's really fun. Yeah, I mean, it is something that comes from probably because of our shared inclinations, but also because we were able to talk about these questions. We were feeding each other's interest in psychology.
True. And related to that, like when you're not working during the day, when you go home, do you often think about your research, or?
Uh-huh. Yeah, I don't think I necessarily think about my research questions obsessively when I go home, but I definitely think about psychology, human psychology, people. I am always, not always, but often trying to explain psychological phenomena, observing myself, other people, thinking about what may account for them, these are psychological questions. These are often social psychological questions, sometimes clinical psychological questions. But I do think a lot about psychology. I do read about people literature, which is again all about social psychology. I mean, the thing about our field, social psychology, is it's quite intuitive. Everybody engages in some form of social psychology in the way they think. We just apply the methods to answer the questions more rigorously. But it's something everybody gets to think about. Almost everybody gets to think about.
True. And more a question more related to your field of interest. So how has been your journey so far in terms of your field of interest? Did you more or less stay in the same broad topic, or did you have like radical shifts? Yeah.
So I would start by saying my research has always been a little scattered, so that it's hard to say I made any radical shifts, because I was making shifts all the time. My interests were very broad, and also when I was in grad school, I was working with multiple advisors, multiple faculty members with different interests, and yet my interests were some of my interests were different from their interests as well. So I ended up studying topics that you can fit into a narrative, and that narrative is about how individuals come together, how they create social units, groups, and so questions around socialization, questions around language, cultural transmission, questions around norms. Those are my interests, and my question fits into that broader picture. But in the end, I would say that's what social psychology is, right? It's social psychology is the study of like how people come together, how they can live together. And so in that sense, I really did not make very radical shifts. I have been studying multiple topics often during the same time, and it is not something that I would recommend to anyone. It's just something that came from who I was. It's not very efficient, first of all, to study very different topics. And there is generally the sense that the market values a strong identity, research identity. But at the same time, I think there are certain benefits to being broad, because you may be able to make connections, and you may also be maybe more creative if you are interested in multiple topics, because within a single area, oftentimes the methodologies may be quite established, and it may not be as easy to make jumps to very different fields. So I guess any field requires or benefits from different types of researchers. For me, it wasn't, again, a choice. It is really just what I enjoy doing and what I can manage to do.
Yeah. And you're now in a business school. You're a professor in a business school, so I guess
Yeah.
this creativity or that like being encountered to different kinds of research topics would also be beneficial in such a setting, I'm assuming.
Yeah, thank you. That's an interesting question. You are right. I mean, one shift I did indeed make was going from a social psychology program to a postdoc in a business school, and then becoming a faculty member at a business school. And so business schools are quite interesting in terms of their research profiles. I'm in organizational behavior, and typically there are the behavioral, the departments that study organizational behavior may be called management, sometimes human resources, but there are different streams of academic research that flow into those departments. There is the more mainstream OB or management research, which as a social psychologist you probably would not encounter. I hadn't encountered it to a large to any significant extent before I became myself a business school faculty member. And then there is more psychological research, social psychological research as well, but more around topics that are relevant to organizations. So, for example, topics such as negotiations or let's say giving feedback, motivating workers. All of these are topics that you may find in social psychology in pockets, but they become more major topics in organizational behavior, decision making as well, of course. So when I became a faculty member in a business school, I did develop an interest in questions that are relevant to organizations and its members, partly because when you teach, you get these questions, and especially when I teach in programs to working people, for them these are very salient questions. Like they really deal with some problem at work, and they need ideas. They, for example, have someone who is a problem worker, and how can they give feedback to that person, for example. So those types of questions became more and more prominent in my mind. Like the more I interacted with students, also partly institutional incentives as well, because being in a business school, there are different types of outlets they may want you to see publish. So that also was one factor.
Okay, I see. And right now, what are the questions that you're currently trying to answer, explore, and why do you think that's important?
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
mean, right now, I am studying multiple questions again. So part of many of these questions I study together with my PhD students, and one topic I recently became interested in is narcissism, and so narcissism is an individual difference, and I know you also study individual differences to some extent, and it's I think it's a very interesting one because it has enormous implications for relationships at work, in personal relationships, and it's a construct that has been studied to some extent, but again, there are also things we don't know about some aspects of it. And in particular, what has been studied quite a lot is what is called agentic grandiose narcissism, which is people who think they are very talented, they are intelligent, thinking very highly of oneself in terms of agentic qualities. Now, I am interested in something called communal narcissism. And communal narcissism is people who self-enhance on communal qualities, which in fact may be more common in some cultures. So say in the American culture, communal narcissism may be less common than, say, in a Middle Eastern culture or Turkish culture. And the idea is, for example, thinking I'm the best mother anybody could be, like I'm the best friend that anybody could be. One day I'm going to save the world. Like these types of grandiose ideas of who you are, but in communal terms. So one question that I'm interested in at the moment is, are communal narcissists more ethical people, or are they less ethical people compared to the general population? And the reason this is interesting is because on the one hand, they do claim to be better people than others, more ethical as well. On the other hand, we do know that agentic narcissists are less ethical. They are more likely to cheat. Now, agentic narcissists and communal narcissists do share this core of being narcissistic, which is about an obsession with the self, basically, too much self-preoccupation. Now, would they be more ethical as they claim to be, or would they be less ethical as other narcissists are? And this is a project with a PhD student, Yang Zhao, who's here at LBS. And we do find at the moment that they are, in fact, just like agentic narcissists. Despite all their claims to be highly ethical people, they are not. But they do claim to be more ethical, unlike agentic narcissists, for example. And I think that's an interesting question, partly because communal narcissists, we do know, are more likely to take roles in charities, religious organizations, public service organizations. So and they may do harm in these roles, and it is important to understand this. And more generally, again, because you also study individual differences, I think I can say that to you comfortably. I do think people underestimate individual differences. I think there is the sense that people are malleable, but people are not as malleable as many people think. There, of course, I don't want to deny that people are malleable, but like you need to pay attention to personality, I think, and make the right choices in your personal life, but also at work life. So that's one question. I have other questions, but again, I don't want to just go through all my research projects now.
Yeah. And when you're measuring this like communal narcissism, I'm thinking that you're doing it in a subtle way, because then you're also like, when you're self-reporting your narcissism, you might also have the tendency to hide it a bit, maybe.
That is what is quite interesting to me, and this is also the case for agentic narcissists. They are, in fact, totally fine saying, I am narcissistic. In fact, one researcher came up with this one single item measurement of narcissism, which is, I am narcissistic. Okay, and these people do say that there's an entitlement scale, which is a subscale of narcissism. But this entitlement scale is a separate scale. There's an item in there which I thought was hilarious. Like, who would ever agree to that? Because it says something to the effect of, if I were on the Titanic, like I should be taking one of the boats. Like, it should be given to me. And I thought, like, nobody would ever pick that. But there are people who actually agree with that. So the interesting thing about narcissism is that if you are narcissistic, you don't think there is a problem with being narcissistic. And we use a scale created by Gebauer and colleagues, and we do see very clear variation. And some people are very, I think, very open to claim that they are better people than others, better parents, better friends. Yeah, so that doesn't seem to be a real, like that. I would have had the same concern, but the data doesn't seem to suggest that it's a real issue.
Yeah, yeah. So when someone says I'm narcissist, we should believe them.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay. And moving more on to your opinions about academia, what do you think is the biggest change that you've seen during your career in academia in terms of the quality of articles or like the psychology education? So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's an interesting question as well. I mean, it's a difficult question because you are also changing, and your position in academia changes, which affects your viewpoint quite a lot. But the biggest change to me, and the one that I think is a very wonderful change, is our focus on reliability and our focus on replicable science. I think all of that has done a great amount of good to us. And when I first entered academia, so around 2002, 2003, these ideas were not existent. They gradually emerged, and throughout my years in grad school, there was more and more talk of these issues around validity in science and reliability in science, and it did affect the way I see the research. It did affect, I think, the way I think about all the research that came before us. And I do absolutely believe it did increase the quality of the work that we do now. It's just a real revolution. And I feel very lucky that that was within the time of my career, like that. And now with that knowledge, you look back at, say, articles from the 60s or 70s. And so, for example, you will find a paper, and a classic paper, and it has 15 participants per cell. And today we know that, like, it means nothing. It just means nothing. You cannot base any idea on a sample size like that in social psychology, because we just don't have those huge effect sizes in psychology unless you are studying something very, very obvious. So but I need to question what do we do with all that knowledge now that we have this knowledge. What do we do with all those studies that brought us here? So it triggers a questioning of the foundations of the field, and it will take some time to sort through all of that. But I think on the whole, it was just really amazing. It is also a protection against fraud and against poor practices. Like I think it is protecting us. I mean, we do know that there are still cases of fraud, but they are less likely to do damage, and we are maybe more likely to catch them. So that was the happiest thing, I think, through my time that I have witnessed.
Yeah. Yeah, during my bachelor's as well, there were like talks about replication crisis.
Yeah.
So at that time, I was actually like worried about the things that I
Mm.
was reading, but in a sense, like from what you're saying, is it's actually a good thing that we're actually thinking about these and working on improving methodology. Uh,
Absolutely. No, I think it is. I mean, I think every field probably makes these kinds of jumps, and so you see it in medicine. I mean, not just in the academia, but also in other knowledge-based fields, where you need to question yourself, and but that takes you to a higher level. And I think we have been going through that, and things are getting better. Absolutely. It's like we have higher standards now, which I think is great.
yeah, no. And now moving on to more about, so the question is like, who is your favorite researcher? Do you have a favorite researcher? Is there anyone that you look up to in academia? So yeah.
Yeah. I do. Well, I do look up to so many different people. It's hard to give any names. I will probably only give names of dead people. But I do. I do. appreciate researchers who gave us new ways of thinking, new perspectives, and so I also appreciate researchers who have maybe because I find some resonance with their style of working, but researchers who have done many different types of research. And so, for example, one person I found very interesting was Jerry Maguire, who was a social psychologist, and you would have heard of him in the context of inoculation theory in persuasion. But when you look at what he has published, you realize he has published on so many interesting questions, and not very he didn't go very deep into a lot of different topics, but he did touch on and created some seminal ideas on many different fields. Now, what I will say is, and I think this is something that is a little bit unfortunate, we tend to idolize people who produce a lot because we get to know them, we get to recognize names. But in fact, there is, of course, a trade-off between quality and quantity. It's not a like one-to-one correlation, but there is certainly the limitations that allow us to produce either a lot of work or very high quality work. And I do think that sometimes people are overweighing the number of publications and not paying a lot of attention to the quality of publications. And I do, the kinds of people that I respect most in the field are not necessarily people who produce a lot of papers, but people who write a paper, and when you read it, you really feel like this is good work, this is great work, like this is very thoughtful, this is high quality work, versus maybe someone who is publishing, say, like 4 papers a year, but they seem kind of not very thoughtful, or maybe they haven't been crafted as carefully. So I do believe that if we would, as a field, put more value on quality, we would benefit from it as a field. But again, it's hard because it's very easy to count, but it's very hard to read articles, right? So you would
True.
have to spend so much more time actually go through the articles and evaluate their quality.
True. And the system kind of like rewards more publications in a sense. So
Absolutely, absolutely. And by the way, there is a correlation also between quality and quantity, not within the person, but across publishers, across scientists. But still, and you learn, like the more you publish, the more you learn, you may get better. But you are right, that the incentives are mostly about publishing more and less about publishing high quality. Again, partly because it is costly to differentiate quality. It's not costly to count.
yeah, no. And the researcher that you said you looked up to, you said he or she focuses on like different kinds of fields. It's kind of like similar to your approach, right? So
Yeah, I know. This is homophily. Liking similar people maybe, but again, I do also appreciate people who really go into the depths. I mean, there are so, as I said, like there are so many people who do devote their careers to as a very limited question, but to such a great work in terms of telling us about it. So for example, Kristin Neff is studying self-compassion, and that's her topic. And like she's studying all kinds of questions around that. Penny Baker, by the way, is someone I absolutely adored. He has done some work on, well, a lot of work on language analysis, and he originated this program, Look, the language analysis program. So I could talk about all the people whose
yeah,
work I like. but there are, again, like I think there are many different ways of doing great research and doing something that touches other people, other researchers. So my personal tastes probably don't matter much, but what matters is that the research is high quality. The research is it has staying power, and like people reading it maybe 30 years from now, they will still see the value in it, which is not
Yeah.
easy in our field, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to come up with something new, but in a sense that so like you said, everyone has an idea about psychology
Yeah,
as well.
exactly.
Uh, and within the field, it's hard to come up with like quality and kind of like a new perspective to things. So yeah.
Exactly. I mean, one person whose work I read during grad school and was really affected by was a researcher named Judith Rich Harris, and she has passed away a few years ago. But she had this American psychologist article on socialization um, by peers. And she had an idea which was quite an original idea. And her idea was that we would think, like, who is socializing children? Parents, right? Like, this seems to be the obvious answer. Her point was, no, it's actually not really parents who socialize children. To a very large extent, children are socialized by their peers, and that's why, for example, when a child's family migrates to another country, the child is not imitating their parents' broken language. In that country, they are imitating their peers, and they speak the language like the natives. They don't speak like their parents. Or, for example, like, why would teenagers just do all kinds of dangerous things that their parents are clearly telling them not to do? Well, partly because they are not trying to satisfy their parents. They are trying to fit into their own social circle. And so the originality of the idea was that, like, something we take for granted, which is like parents socialize their children, well, maybe that's not really true. And another nice thing about this idea is it takes so much weight off of the shoulders of parents. Like,
True.
every time I talk I talk about this research to parents, like, I they tell me it's very reassuring,
Yeah.
and it gives them a little bit peace of mind. But she's really supporting it with a lot of evidence. She has this book called The Nurture Assumption. That was the book I read in grad school, which another person whose work I like very much.
Okay. Okay. Good to know. And one of my last questions, do you have any advice to bachelor's or master's students who want to stay in academia?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing I would suggest is testing if it is the right thing for them. And it's hard to know that if all you have seen is textbooks, right? I mean, I feel this very interesting, but and it can be very interesting to learn about, but becoming an academic is not about learning, it's about producing the knowledge, and producing the knowledge is really quite different. They share some components, which is, again, learning and learning from others and working hard, but it requires some other qualities. So I would definitely suggest to anyone who did not have any research experience but wants to go into the academia to get that experience. And now I think it's more available as an option than it was 20 years ago. A lot of institutions have RAs, research assistants, and now it's actually also possible to work remotely. I have heard, and we have been recruiting some PhD students who have exercised this option of working remotely. So you may be even contacting institutions outside of your home country. I mean, there's a way of doing that. There's a right way of doing that. But there are the first idea, I think, is to to understand what it looks like to do research. The second step would be understanding the lifestyle of being an academic. The third thing would be understanding that not everybody who gets into the academia gets exactly what they want, because academia is a somewhat I mean, there is a lot of attrition, and people can end up in different positions, which is also fine. But that should also be understood. It's not like going into a company and then make like knowing that like you can live in that city and you can have your job. So it requires flexibility in terms of life choices sometimes. Like all these life style factors, there should be also some awareness around it, which you can easily get by talking, for example, to some academics. And we do organize, so people who are in institutions with undergrads may organize these types of talks with students, just to make them aware of all these factors.
Yeah. And in terms of your career as well, like you started in Turkey and then went to the States and then came to Europe. So I think that also shows some flexibility in like in terms of your career, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I never felt it took flexibility to do that. It just were always going with the best option available at the moment. But yes, I mean, it may require you to travel. And you probably are also witnessing that. But our students, the jobs they find, they could be anywhere in the world. This year we had 3 students on the job market in our department, and one of them is going to the United States. The second one is going to Dubai, and the third one is going to stay in London, so at a different institution in London. So, and you could go anywhere in Europe. So again, you need to have that kind of flexibility in the current market.
True. And in terms of the PhD students, do you have any advice to them, to me, for example?
PhD students, I do have some advice. Generally, when I work with the students in our department, one of the things that I really want them to do is to work with multiple faculty members, because there is really something different to be learned from different people. Different institutional arrangements may make it less or more possible or likely to happen. But generally, it's a good thing to get exposure to different styles, different people. The other thing that I would absolutely recommend is connecting to other PhD students, because the people you connect with now, they do become your colleagues, and you see them at conferences, you see them when you visit other schools. They really become your tribe, and it's good to make these connections. It gives you more of a sense of being part of the community, and that sense of belonging makes it both more enjoyable to be in this career, but also it makes you more successful, because like if you know someone personally, you tend to know their work, you tend to maybe talk about ideas with them. Maybe that could lead to a collaboration. Maybe they will point you to someone who is studying a topic. So those connections do matter. I'm more of an introverted person, but I think there is value to really making friends with different people, even at that stage.
Yeah. I always thought about like academic kind of like advices, like reading more, or like you said, collaborating with other faculty members. But as you said, this social aspect is also very important, both like for mental health, I'd say, but at the same time, your future career.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I mean that they help you, especially if you are on the job market, commiserating, exchanging knowledge, all of that is good
Yeah,
and
no.
helpful.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
joining to the podcast.
Thank
It
you
was
very
a
much,
really
Anna.
pleasure.
Thank
Yeah.
you for all the questions. Thank you very
Yeah.
much.